I mean, he had the power in his speeches to move the masses.
As he listens to BBC, he is immediately convinced that they're telling the truth.
My friend Helmut thought that was his Christian obligation to warn the people. And then he opened the door and there comes my friend Rudy. And I said, Rudy, what are you doing here? He is the third in our group. I said, what do you mean the third? Who is the second? And Helmut typed on it, Hitler the murderer, Hitler is the guilty one.
The first thing we see is that he's emerged from some kind of a process as a full-blown anti-Nazi. He puts the prefix VER on the front of the word Führer, which means that Hitler is now the seducer of the people.
I opened the door and there stood two guys with that long dark leather coat, and he lifted up his lapel from the coat and there was the badge, Geheime Staatspolizei, Gestapo. The Nazis, they don't want you to know the truth. The truth was deadly.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Truth and Conviction live stream. I'm Matt Whitaker, the creator and director of the Truth and Conviction series, and just happy to have you here. I'm grateful to all those of you who are tuning in right at the beginning here. If you're hearing this now, it means that you are right on top of things and tuning in early. Either that or you're watching it later and are seeing this, but either way, we love both of you. We love all of you. I was just thinking that it's interesting that I think this is my 8th one of these that I do, one of these live streams that I've done, and I still get nervous before I do them. I still have I have to make all these notes. I don't know if you can see it. Make all these notes and color code things and try and figure out a way to remember all this stuff that I want to talk about. But they say it gets easier at some point, and hopefully it will. But again, thank you though for bearing with me and for tuning in. I have a few things that I just want to kind of go over real quickly, kind of get out of the way, I guess, real quickly before we dive into what I think is going to be a really good show, and I'm excited for you to be able to see some of the clips that we're going to watch today, and especially to meet an incredible human being. Really excited about that. But before we do that, I just wanted, for those of you, we're of course grateful for all of our Truth and Conviction fans who are here, and of course all of our Angel Studios fans who are here. For any of you who are here for the first time, I just wanted to kind of give a little recap, if I can, of what the Truth and Conviction series is, kind of where we are. Of course, you probably know that this is a series, a true story about that took place in World War II, Nazi Germany, about a 16-year-old young man who ran a resistance group against Hitler with some of his best friends, these teenage boys that stood up to Hitler. And we're making a series out of it that you'll be able to watch. And the stage that we're at right now, as we're preparing for what we hope will be an investment round where you and everybody can invest to be a part of the Truth and Conviction series. Right now we're in what we call the testing the waters phase. That's I don't know if it's a legal term, but it's the term that the attorneys say that we use. And what that essentially means is that we're just gauging interest to see how many people and how interested people are to see this powerful true story and to help us get it made. And so if you go to angel.com/truth, and you can go on there, and that's where you can see it there. This is kind of what you'll see. And there's a button there. You can see that orange button that says express interest. What that means is that you are expressing interest to invest if and when we are able to open up an investment round. It's not an investment at this point. You're just expressing interest in that, but you are able to express interest at specific amounts, and that could be $25, that could be $25,000. But the hope and the intent is that we will in the not too distant future, the hope is that we'll open up this for investors to come in. And I think we're so used to, when we talk about crowdfunding, we're so used to kind of this concept that it's a donation. And that I might get whatever it is, I might get a t-shirt back or get my name in the credits or something like that. This is not what this is. Angel Studios has created a model that allows all of us, all of us, to become part owners, to become investors in this, so that if this project is profitable and makes money, all of those who invested in it, whether they invested $100 or whether they invested, $25,000, they see a return on that, and that's the hope. And so, anyway, I just kind of wanted to put that out there. So, if you're watching this and wondering, well, how do I do that? Just go to angel.com/truth and click there. And if you would like to click on the express interest button, that's what that means. You're expressing interest that when this becomes open for an investment round, you'll be one of the first ones that are contacted and given the opportunity to do that. Okay. I also wanted to remind you, as we're going through this live stream, feel free. In fact, I would ask you please to make comments below. It obviously helps the algorithm get noticed and kind of raise up the ranks, and so more people get exposure to it. But also, if you've got questions, we're going to be talking about some really powerful things tonight. And so if you have questions, I'm going to try and take a few minutes at the very end to answer some questions that come in. So please comment below with questions that you may have, and we will try and get to as many of those as we can. Okay. So 80 years ago, this was the year, so 80 years ago this year, 1942, is when Helmut Huebner and Karl-Heinz Schnibe and Rudi Voba, his two friends, were running their resistance group. They ran it through 1941-42, and it was the beginning of 42 when things came to a halt, when they were eventually captured by the Gestapo. But throughout this year, I've been thinking about that. It's like, oh yeah, 80 years ago today, such and such happened. 80 years ago today was the day that Helmut was arrested. 80 years ago today was the day that Karl and Rudi were arrested by the Gestapo. We kind of have these dates in mind. Well, 80 years ago, this past August 11th, so just a few weeks ago, in 1942, was the day that these three young men stood trial in Hitler's highest court in Berlin. It was actually called the People's Court, and don't mistake that for like Judge Judy or Judge Wapner, because it wasn't anything like that. In fact, even though it was called the People's Court, very often the people called it the Blood Tribunal. And so that, I think, speaks a little bit more clearly about what kind of an experience it was to be there in the People's Court. But it was on that day 80 years ago, August 11th, that Helmut and Karl and Rudi stood trial. And why were they there? Because they spoke the truth, because they were trying to get the truth out about what was really happening in Germany and in Nazi-controlled territories, what was really happening to the Jews, what was really happening to their sons who were out fighting on the front in Russia. Helmut was trying to get that information out, and when they were captured for it, that's why they were standing trial on August 11th, 1942. I've mentioned before, but for those of you who are new here for the first time, just a very quick recap on, it was 21 years ago, it was in 2001, when a friend asked me, hey, have you ever heard of Helmut Huebner? And I'd not heard the story before. And this friend said, kind of briefly explained the story about this 16-year-old who had had enough and found the truth and decided to type up these seditious flyers, anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler flyers. He initially did it on these little red pieces of paper like this, very similar to this, kind of like quarter sheet size pieces of paper. and he would type up these anti-Hitler things. Anyway, I heard this story 21 years ago and found out that the last surviving member of this resistance group was still alive, lived not very far away from me, actually, and so we just called him up on the phone and asked if he would be willing to share his story, and he agreed to. And hearing that first-person account just was incredible, and really changed my life. And I've decided from that point forward that I was going to figure out a way to tell this story. So 20 years ago, we made a PBS documentary about the story called Truth and Conviction, the Helmut Hubner story. And it was while I was shooting that documentary, we brought in a number of people to interview, people who, were at that point still, elderly, but they had been friends with Helmut and Karl and Rudy, when they were all teenagers in Hamburg, Germany in 1941-42. And one of the men that I invited to come in was a man named Werner Sommerfeld. And Werner was younger than Karl and Helmut and Rudy. He was a few years younger, but he knew them well. He was friends with them. Helmut used to go over to his house almost every Sunday. In fact, all three boys, Helmut, Karl, and Rudy, would go over to the Sommerfeld house on Sunday, partially because he had three really cute sisters, but they also just loved being there. And in fact, Helmut developed a very close relationship with Werner's mother, and that we'll talk more about that later. But within that context of doing those interviews for that documentary, we sat down with Werner Sommerfeld, and it was a short documentary, or excuse me, it was a short interview that I did with him, less than a half hour, but it's one of the most powerful experiences. I have interviewed more than 1,000 people in my career and filmed them on camera, and it's one of the most powerful and poignant experiences I've ever had. And we're going to share a little bit of that interview done 21 years ago as well. So I'm excited for you to meet Werner. You're going to get to meet him as well. Just real quick, again, if you haven't had a chance to go to angel.com/truth and check out the site. And if you are able to, we would appreciate it if you would express interest and just let us know if this is one of those kind of stories that, you hear about those stories that people say, wow, that's incredible. Someone should make that into a movie. That's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to do. So if as you're watching this, you're thinking, yeah, we need to do this, I'd appreciate it if you'd express interest and let us know. Okay. I've kind of given you the recap. I'll just very briefly again. It was in 1941, early 1942 that Helmut was writing up these resistance, leaflets and passing them out, and he and his buddies were putting them out on the streets of Hamburg, always staying just barely ahead of the Gestapo, because the Gestapo was finding these, and some people were turning them in to the Gestapo and finding them and reading them. They were so powerfully written and so well written that the Gestapo was absolutely convinced that it was like a university professor or somebody that was writing these, and they were trying to track down who that was. But the whole time it was a 16-year-old kid who was writing these things. Helmut turned 17 on January 8th, 1942, and it was less than a month later, about 3 weeks later, that the Gestapo finally tracked him down. Esther, if you want to cue up that first clip from the documentary Truth and Conviction.
It was 5 p.m. on February 5th when the Gestapo arrested Hubner at his work. They took him immediately to his grandparents' apartment where he was living at the time. There they found the illegal radio, several flyers, and the typewriter with an unfinished flyer still in it. He was then taken to the Gestapo headquarters in Hamburg. Here the interrogations began as the Gestapo tried to ascertain who else was involved in the conspiracy.
One Sunday I went to church. Helmut wasn't there, so I thought maybe he's sick or something, And then our branch president said, brothers and sisters, please stay on after our meeting. I have a sad announcement to make. And when we wait for him, he came and then he said, I got a phone call from the Gestapo and our young brother and friend Helmut Hübener was arrested. He said, I don't have details, but I know it is politically, you know. And the same moment my mom turned to me and said, what happens? I said, I don't know. That was the first time I had to lie to my mother, and it bothered me. It bothered me. And I said, Mom, I don't know. She said, oh, come on. I said, you've been there 3 times a week. You must know. I said, I really don't. Then she looked at me like, can I believe you? I said, honestly, Mom. She says, well, then it's probably not so bad. Then he probably comes home, and it's okay. But I know better, you know. I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I hope that Helmut kept his promise.
And that is firsthand experience, firsthand witness from Karl-Heinz Schnibe. When he says there, I hope that Helmut kept his promise, what he's talking about is that when these 3 boys had decided they were going to get together and do this resistance and put out these leaflets, they made a pact and they made a promise to each other that if one of them got caught, they would not turn in the others, and they all promised each other that. And so when Karl got arrested, he was thinking, you know, I hope that Helmut kept his promise, and that maybe, you know, maybe he gave them my name, but he didn't tell them everything else. And so that's really what he was referring to there. The interesting thing is, of course, the Gestapo was keeping copious notes of all that they were doing, all of their interrogations. And one of the things that I read as I was studying these notes from when they were interrogating Helmut right after they had arrested him, is they use this phrase, and it says, after lengthy remonstrations and explicit admonitions, the young man admitted to such and such. And I looked at those terms, lengthy remonstrations and explicit admonitions, and I just got chills. I just realized those are euphemisms for after we tortured him, after we beat him up for 5 days and 5 nights, they broke him, is essentially what they were saying. And Helmut then, after all of that time, gave them the names of his 2 best friends. Esther, if you want to cue up that next clip.
February 10th, I went to work again. There was a knock on the door, boom, boom, boom. And I said to my fellow worker, I said, Willy Vorbeck is his name. I said, Willy, I get it. He said, okay. So he went in the room and sat down and started eating, you know. I opened the door and there's the 2 guys, about 6'4", 6'3" tall, with that long dark leather coat. And he lifted up his lapel from the coat, and there was the badge. Geheime Staatspolizei, Gestapo. He said, are you Karl-Heinz Schnibe? I said, yes, I am. He said, you know why we are here? I said, yes, I do. I had said, who, me? No idea. I would get it right away. You just had to look at these guys. I mean, they had feet that big and hands like a toilet seat. I mean, they use it. They know how to use it. We heard story enough how brutal and mean the Gestapo was. I said, yes, I know. He said, come with us. I said, can I change clothes? I had my whites on. He said, you come as you are. I said, okay. So I yelled to Willy. I said, Willy, I have to leave for a minute. He said, okay. Leave for a minute? 7 years. And then they drove me downtown to Stadthaus, where the Gestapo headquarters is. And there the interrogation started. When they stopped at the Gestapo prison, Fuhlsbüttel, and we got out, I had no idea that you have to face the wall, about 2 inches with your nose from the wall. I didn't know that, but I learned fast. Then came an SS-man by, a Gestapo man, and I don't know, he probably had a bad day, so he pushed my head against the wall, you know, and that bust my nose. So the whole wall was bloody. They punished me for messing up the wall. You picked, what did you do with our clean walls? And oh my gosh, you know. I thought, what's going on? I had no idea. And needless to say, I couldn't sleep the whole night, you know. That was so noisy there. I've heard men cry and scream, women cry and scream, and you could hear when they got hit, you could hear. It was terrible, it was terrible. I had no idea that for the next 5 months, this is my home. Nobody to talk to, nothing to read. I couldn't lay during the day on the bunk. I had to sit on that little wobbly chair. You start talking to yourself. That's okay, but when you answer, then you've had it, you know. It was terrible for 5 months. One time the cell opened and they served papers to us and was stamped all over, secret, top secret. So when I've read that, I didn't give 5 cents for none of our lives. I said, this is the end, they kill us. We will be tried for high treason and aiding and abetting the enemy.
So it was in early August. Here you can see footage of the train heading out of Hamburg. It was in early August that they were taken to Berlin, and they stood before the highest court in Germany, before Hitler-appointed judges, and were put on trial.
The first one who got called to the high bench was my friend Helmut. And they told him his crime, and then they asked Helmut, young man, do you honestly believe that Germany will lose the war? And Helmut said, don't you? But the judges said, leave him alone, leave him alone. Then they asked, do you want to tell me that the German broadcast is wrong and the English is correct? And he said, exactly. His attorney, he looked at him and said, are you nuts? But I think Helmut knew that his life is gone.
I could remember sitting there and hearing Karl tell me that for the first time, and he really felt like at some point during that trial that Helmut realized he needed to kind of take all of the attention onto himself, and in order to do that, Karl felt that what he was trying to do was to save the lives of his 2 friends. By doing that. And so he really did, just kind of like I mentioned earlier, get in the face of the judge and start pointing out the inconsistencies and the lies that he was telling. Again, the 17-year-old kid in this court doing that, and it worked in that all the attention went on Helmut, and it saved the lives of his 2 friends. And even though they were sentenced to years of hard labor, they lived, but for Helmut the sentence was death, and after he was sentenced to death, the judge asked him one more question.
And then they asked us if we want to have a word to say. Rudi declined, I declined, you know, and Helmut said, yes, I do. And then the judge said, okay, and Helmut stood there and said, I have to die now for no crime at all. He said, but your turn is next. 17 years old.
I've seen those clips many times, of course, but it's powerful for me every single time when I hear some of what Helmut said, and to hear it firsthand from someone who was standing right next to him when he said it in this Nazi court is just amazing. And as the years go by, that date, August 11th, 1942, I think becomes more and more important. And part of the reason for that is that those eyewitnesses are dying, that we're losing them. So Rudi Voba, who was standing on the other side of Helmut there, passed away from cancer in 1993. I never had the opportunity to meet Rudi. This was before I discovered the story for myself. But he passed away in 93. Thankfully, I was able to meet Karl and become very close friends with him. But Karl passed away at the age of 86 in 2010. And any living witness who was there in that court is gone now. And so as August 11th this year was approaching, and as I was thinking about how to memorialize that date, what would be a good thing to do to remember what those boys did on that date, that's when I thought, you know what, I want to go see Werner Sommerfeld, who, as as far as I know, is the last living person who knew Helmut personally and who remembers him. And so that's what I did. I took a couple cameramen with me, and we went up to see Werner Sommerfeld on August 11th, 2022. Today, we're outside the home of a man named Werner Sommerfeld. Werner is the last living person who knew and remembers Helmut. I just thought this would be a great day to stop by Werner's house and talk to him about what he remembers, about Helmut, about Carl and Rudy, about Helmut's friendship with his family. So let's go say hi. Werner is one of the most delightful people you will ever meet. I always feel better about myself after I've been around him. He just exudes friendliness, genuine compliments. He just loves people and loves to be around people.
Come on in, young man.
How you doing, Werner?
Good to see you.
Good to see you as
Look
well.
at those two handsome young boys here.
So everybody, this is Werner Sommerfeld.
Yeah,
I've been telling him about you and how nice you are, so.
I'm glad you got together with Matt. He's a good guy, you know that?
You see what I mean? Tell me what this is.
Wehrpass identification.
It's got the swastika on it, which is just, it
Yeah.
seems so strange, but this was your,
Yeah.
was your identification that you carried as a young teenager?
Yeah. My dad, Gustav, Marie, Arthur, Hedy, Leni, Mary, Werner. And these three beauty queens, Helmut and Karl-Heinz and Rudy. I came always to visit them, and we had a good time.
I know that you've told me that Helmut had a close relationship
Very much.
with your mother.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He told my mother that he's going to be big. He does something great. And my mother said she knew he never boasted about himself. He was very intellectual. He was way above his age, stood fast in what he believed and thought.
There we go. Okay. Now I got to make sure we get photocopies of those things. Should we go get those and do that? One of the main reasons that I wanted to interview Werner Sommerfeld 21 years ago when we were shooting for the documentary was because on the last day of Helmut's life, he knew he was going to be executed in a couple of hours. He was at Plötzensee prison outside of Berlin. The guards gave him permission to write 3 letters. And he wrote 1 letter to his mother, 1 letter to his grandmother, and then he wrote a 3rd letter to this woman named Marie Sommerfeld, and that is Werner Sommerfeld's mother.
We saw, at the end, you could see the ink was a little blotted out because he must have shed some tears because he knew that was the end of his life on this earth. Dear Sister Sommerfeld and family, when you receive this letter, I will be dead. But before my execution, I have been granted one wish to write 3 letters to my loved ones. I want to thank you for the letter you sent to me, dear Sister Sommerfeld, which they withheld from me. I also want to thank you for the many happy hours I was able to spend in the circle of your family. Please remember me kindly. I'm very thankful to my Heavenly Father that this agonizing life is coming to an end this evening. I could not stand it any longer anyway. My Father in heaven knows that I have done nothing wrong. I know that God lives, and He will be the proper judge of this matter. Until our happy union in that better world, I remain your friend and brother in the gospel, Helmut. Yeah, Helmut Hübner, 70 years old, 1942. I love it.
And you knew him. That's what still amazes me.
Yeah, I know him.
I know of him, and I know people who knew him. You knew him, and you are the last living person that I know who personally knew and remembers Helmut Hubener.
I'm sure.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I've done so many interviews and talked to so many amazing people, but those few minutes 21 years ago with Werner Sommerfeld, when he read those words, the English translation of those words that were written 2 hours approximately before Helmut was executed, to Werner's mother, just so incredibly powerful, and his emotion as he shared that. You know, it had been decades since it had happened, but the emotions were still very tender and very raw, and that is a moment that I will never forget. The last words written by such a young, prolific writer, who wrote so much and put so many words out there, you know, over 1941 and early 42. But his last words, and talking about the fact that he knew, that God knew, that he hadn't done anything wrong, and that God would be the judge of this. And I just feel like that's so powerful. Helmut and Carl and Rudy were trying to do and follow the counsel of the old Christian hymn that they had grown up singing together, with Werner alongside them at church every Sunday, and often singing that old Christian hymn, "Do what is right, let the consequence follow." And that's exactly what they did. And as I look at it, as I personalize it, I've realized that over the last 2 decades, it's what I've been trying to do. Imperfectly, but trying to do what is right, come what may, whatever the consequences are. If I feel like something is the right thing to do, to try and do that. And that's the power of the Truth and Conviction story of this series, is that it teaches us what it means and the importance of standing up for what is right. And it also teaches the teenagers. It teaches our kids and our grandkids how to do that same thing, how to stand up, come what may. I'm gonna talk about a couple things here that I hadn't planned on. The team may have just squeezed their mugs a little bit tighter, but I just want to just kind of talk real frankly for a moment. I hear often enough, and in fact I've said it often enough, you know, why are there so many lousy films that come out? Why do those films get made? Why do they put so much money into those kind of, you know, horrible stories and those kind of things? And I need to be real clear here. I am not one who hates on Hollywood. Most of my very favorite films that have changed my life, came out of Hollywood. But I also recognize that there is a reason why a lot of people are saying, why can't we make something better? You know, why can't we tell some of these true stories that need to be told? And I would just say that this is an opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is, or in this sense, real specifically, to put our interest where our mouth is. And when this, and if this opens up for an investment, to literally put our money where our mouth is and say, okay, this is a story. Angel Studios has found a way to allow us to answer that question ourselves. Is why aren't people making better movies? Well, here we have the opportunity. Let's do it. Let's take this opportunity. Let's tell this story among others that are worth telling. But go to angel.com/truth and express interest, and let us know if this is something that you want to be a part of, because when and if I'm just going to, again, be real honest here. So we can't say when this opens up without saying if, because the attorneys have told us we can't promise it. It may not happen. So I'll just say it is our hope and our intent that in the not-too-distant future, we will be opening up an investment round for this TV series. And if you have expressed interest already, you'll be first in line to know when you can actually invest in this and be a part of telling a story that's going to be a blessing and a benefit, I believe, a blessing and a benefit to, of course, to anybody who watches it, but especially to the rising generation, to those teenagers who need good role models, who need to see how important it is and what it means to stand up for that kid at school who's being bullied, to tell the truth even when you don't want to, even when you realize you're going to get in trouble, but to speak the truth anyway. That's the kind of project that we feel we're involved in, and I hope that you want to be involved in as well. Thank you for, I'll now take my soapbox and step off of it. Thank you for hearing me out on that. Okay. I don't know if there were any questions. In fact, Esther, I don't know, do we have time to answer? Oh, it looks like we do have some questions here. So we'll see how many of these we can get through. I'll take that real quick. Let's see. Oh, we've got, thank you, Garrett. So Garrett just passed me. It's not a resistance flyer, although it is on the red paper, but oh, cool. So we had a number of people who have just during this live stream who have been expressing interest to these specific amounts. I'll just quickly go through a few of them. Everybody tonight preferred to remain anonymous. So we've got somebody, an anonymous person who expressed interest at $150, another one at $150, we've got another one at $30. All of these are the way that these people are trying to put their money where their mouth is and be involved in a project that is going to make a difference, and so that we can say, yeah, we're part of making a film, we're making a series that's worth telling and that's worth showing. So thank you again to all of you who have expressed interest in these last few minutes. Okay, there was a question up there, Esther, and I jumped away from it. Do you mind bringing that up again? Okay, the only disappointment is that I thought you were going to announce that investing was ready to begin. Looking forward to that day. I'm with you, man. We're working as hard as we can to be ready as soon as we can to hopefully be able to open up that investment. And then CU55 Williams will, if you've expressed interest already, you'll be one of the first ones to know that the investment round is open and that we are rocking and rolling and ready to go. Thank you for that good question. Any other questions? Okay. Where can we watch this documentary? That's a really good question. Over the last 20 years, it has been on different PBS affiliates. It was made for a PBS affiliate, and so it was on PBS for quite a number of years. Every once in a while, you'll still see it. It gets some airplay. I know that it's possible to purchase it. I think you can buy it and find it online. But the shortest answer is that as we get closer to production and to making this film, we're going to make sure that as many people as possible can easily get access and watch the full documentary. Thank you for that. Let's see, will Werner or any of his family make an appearance in the show? If not, did they influence any of the characters? Well, first of all, yes, they did influence the characters. And in fact, even that moment that I showed earlier of Werner reading Helmut's last written words, is going to be in the series. It'll be part of that final episode, and a very powerful moment. And so we're still determining how much of those characters, Werner's character. Werner had an older brother named Arthur who was Helmut's age and who was peripherally involved in the resistance group. He had read some of them, but when they got to him and questioned him, he was apparently able to honestly say he had never helped to distribute them, and so was able to avoid that. But the Sommerfeld family, an incredible family, and so important, such an important part of this story. Let's see, will you be able to build the backstory of how they procured parts, piece by piece, to assemble the contraband radio? That's a great question. So I'll just give you a real quick, on the shortwave radio, which was illegal. So the way that in Nazi Germany, they had, as they call it, the people's radio. And it was a really weak radio that really could only get about 3 stations. And of course, those stations were controlled by Joseph Goebbels, by the propaganda ministry. And so all that people could hear legally was what Hitler and Goebbels wanted them to hear. For those who could get access to shortwave radios, which could receive broadcasts from outside, from Russia, from the United States, from the UK, from London, they could hear something else. And what happened in the story is that Helmut's older brother, who was serving as a soldier in the German army, came home from France, and he smuggled with him this shortwave radio, and it didn't work. But Helmut, being Helmut, was very curious, and he took it apart and fixed it. And his brother left it there. He went back to serve in the army, and that's when Helmut, after he'd fixed the radio on his own, started tuning in to the BBC broadcasts and the BBC. Oh, we've got more. Okay, thank you, Garrett. But Helmut started tuning into the BBC broadcasts. They would broadcast in the German language and tell the truth. And for Helmut, it was mind-blowing. It was eye-opening as he would listen to the People's Radio and hear what Goebbels was saying. And then he would listen to what the BBC was saying, and he could just sense that this sounds like the truth. This is what's really happening. And from there began listening more and more and more. So love that. Yes, it was to get that contraband radio was a really interesting part of the story, which that will be part of the series as we meet Helmut's older brother and bringing home that radio and what that meant to that boy for the rest of his life. Okay, any more questions there?
No more questions, just a comment.
Okay, and just a comment here. Again, thank you from CU55 Williams. Stand up for truth at all times. Never back down to oppression. And man, do I agree with that. I wish I were always better at it. You know, people have asked me, or I've asked myself many times, would I have done with those, what Helmut and Carl and Rudy did? If I'm totally honest, I don't know if I would, especially, as a husband and father with children. I don't know if I would have. I hope I would have found some way to stand up to oppression, to stand up for the truth. But I'm grateful for the example that Helmut set for us. So thank you again for that comment. This is the night for anonymous expressions of interest. So another wonderful expression of interest to $150. Again, thank you to all of you for not only for tuning in, but for those who are able to express interest. Just very grateful. That's the way that this process works. I've spent years, as we've been working for so many years to get this project off the ground, and I've spent times in offices in Los Angeles and in homes of wealthy people asking for them to invest millions of dollars. This is a different approach, and I love it. It's again, power to the people. And instead of a few really wealthy people saying, okay, we're going to put in millions of dollars, it's 15 or 20,000 people like you and me who don't have that kind of money, but who can say, you know what, I can put in $500. I want to invest that, or $1,000, or whatever that amount is that you feel that you are able to invest in it. So thank you to all of you for that. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Do you mind, Esther, do we have a moment just to bring up the funding page real quick and see where we're at? Okay, cool. So we've crossed over 1.2 million. So thank you to everybody for that. It's really cool to see expressions of interest at that level, and we're getting to where we need to be able to actually open up to the investment round. So special thanks to Werner Sommerfeld, to his daughter Sheila, and to the whole Sommerfeld family who opened up their home and their hearts to our little camera crew to come in on August 11th and to participate in this. We're so very grateful to all of you for tuning in, and we will see you at the next live stream. Thanks again.